Let us imagine for a moment that you and your family have fallen into unimaginable wealth and are on the hunt for a new gaff. You could buy a London townhouse, of course, or you could buy 700 years of English history wrapped in stone, glass and scandal. Ripley Castle, set among 445 acres of Yorkshire parkland, has finally been put up for sale, for the first time since the reign of Edward III. And although its price was once £21 million as recently as the top of this year, by this autumn it has fallen to £13.5 million, a staggering 35% cut that has left even estate agents blinking. Behind that markdown lies a story worthy of dynasties and downfall. A family that survived kings, plagues, and Cromwell himself, only to be brought low by the quiet arithmetic of modern Britain. Therefore, in today's episode of Old Money Mansions, we're touring the castle that outlived monarchs, sheltered traitors, defied Cromwell, and, after 7 centuries, has finally surrendered to the modern market. For the first time in 717 years, Ripley Castle is on the market. Its price cut from £21 million to £13.5 million after more than 8 months without a buyer. The reduction is brutal, 35% in a single stroke, and it turns a private Yorkshire saga into public theatre, inviting the world to weigh a lineage against a ledger. Step through the arched approach and into a house that reads like an anthology of English architecture, where medieval gritstone walls and ashlar dressings meet grey slate roofs and 4.5 centuries of layered craftsmanship. Your first sensation is vertical, a Georgian reception hall composed with classical proportion, its self-supporting cantilever staircase rising with improbable grace beneath what many consider one of the country's finest, armorial, stained glass windows. The window is a heraldic chronicle in coloured light, a stacked history of marriages, alliances and achievements that condenses more than 7 centuries of Ingleby lineage into shields and crests that seem to move as the day turns. Turn from glass to timber and the house reveals its rarest secret of carpentry, a Tudor wagon roof in the knight's chamber, one of only 3 known survivals in England, its curved oak ribs forming a quiet barrel of time. Behind that panelling, a priest hole lay invisible for almost 4 centuries, until its discovery in 1963, a void so perfectly concealed that it outlasted the pursuivants who once hunted the men hidden within. Climb again, and the flooring changes register from land to sea, for in the tower room you're literally walking the deck of an 18th century Royal Navy frigate, the oak planks of HMS Rose carrying footsteps instead of broadsides. The plan of the house unfolds in 3 chapters of stone and style: a medieval core, a Tudor strengthening marked by a 3-story old tower with massive buttresses, and a Georgian remaking between 1780 and 1786 that imposed order upon romance. Rooms speak in sequence: the reception hall to an inner hall with perfect symmetry. Then the oval drawing room and its larger companion, both set to drink the long views over lake and deer park like measured draughts of serenity. The landscape answers with design: 165.59 acres of registered parkland laced to an engineered chain of ornamental lakes, 19th century sightlines aimed from principal rooms toward water, pasture, and the moving punctuation of deer. Beyond the lawns, the 4-acre walled garden hardens into geometry and glass, with an orangery of palms, a listed garden room for company, working bothies, a productive kitchen plot, a millennium knot parterre, and a heritage orchard in season. This is not merely a private house, but a working estate of 445 acres. Its east wing turned discreetly to commerce, with events rooms, estate offices, shops, and a coaching-in hotel of 23 bedrooms woven into the village fabric. Even the statistics resolve into atmosphere: 11 reception rooms, 26 bedrooms, and the calm clatter of history that comes from hinges, hearths and floors that have endured far longer than most nations. It is beautiful, improbable, and suddenly vulnerable, a Grade 1 listed colossus whose survival now depends on modern arithmetic rather than medieval perseverance. And just beyond the light of that stained glass sits the bill for 7 centuries, waiting to be read aloud in the next room. When Sir Thomas Ingleby inherited Ripley Castle in 1974, he was 18 years old and suddenly responsible for 7 centuries of family history and an inheritance tax bill that could have erased it all. His father, Sir Jocelyn William Vivian Ingleby, the 5th Baronet, had died without warning. The government's death duties struck like a guillotine. 2/3 of the estate had to be sold immediately just to meet the tax. Land, heritage, and memory were liquidated to pay a bill written in the currency of modern Britain. Sir Thomas, educated at Eton College and the Royal Agricultural College in Cirencester, returned home not as a young aristocrat, but as a debtor to history. His task was not to rule the estate, but to save it. He spent the next 50 years rebuilding the castle's finances stone by stone, transforming Ripley from private inheritance into public enterprise. The castle opened to visitors in the 1980s and soon became a thriving business, part heritage attraction, part wedding venue, part agricultural estate. There was a hotel, the Boar's Head, with 23 bedrooms that generated £1,600,000 annually. There were events booked years in advance, a gift shop, tea room, and even monthly markets that filled the lawns with visitors. At its height, the estate employed more than 100 people and operated 7 days a week. But behind that commercial success lay exhaustion. Lady Emma Ingleby recalls working without pause, their diaries always full, their time never their own. "You suddenly realize we're nearly 70, she said. "We've spent our entire lives as unpaid custodians of English heritage." The financial arithmetic grew more punishing with every passing year. In just the last 5 years alone, the Inglebys spent £2,500,000 on restoration, £500,000 per year, more than £1,300 a day. Each repair required permission from historic England, and every approval meant traditional materials and craftspeople at costs approaching £2,000 per square metre. Sir Thomas likes to say there isn't a building on the estate that hasn't been rebuilt, and he's right. Yet in the end, even decades of devotion could not defeat mathematics. The castle that once hosted kings now needed a buyer with £13.5 million in cash, and another million annually just to keep the lights on. The 5 Ingleby children made the decision that none of their ancestors had ever dared, to end the inheritance. They did not want the weight of Ripley Castle. They wanted lives measured in freedom, not square footage. When Sir Thomas finally agreed to sell, he described the sensation as a physical release. "It was like a weight being lifted off my shoulders," he said. For the first time in his life, he was free. And with that single act, 700 years of unbroken lineage reached its quiet end, sending us backward in time to the beginning of the Inglebys, when loyalty and faith were worth far more than property or pounds. Long before inheritance taxes and modern accountants, the Inglebys were already paying dearly for their beliefs. Their history reads like a chronicle of loyalty misplaced, of faith defended beyond reason. In the 16th century, Ripley Castle stood as a Catholic stronghold in a Protestant kingdom. Sir William Ingleby and his family refused to renounce their faith, even as Elizabeth I's laws turned Catholic worship into treason. Their defiance would lead them from favour to persecution, and from prominence to ruin. Francis Ingleby, the 4th son, was born around 1551 within the castle walls. Brilliant and idealistic, he studied at Brasenose College, Oxford, and trained as a lawyer at the Inner Temple before abandoning his career to become a Catholic priest. He returned to England in 1584, knowing that the decision meant death. 2 years later, he was arrested near York when his companions showed him too much deference, betraying his status as a priest. On June 3, 1586, Francis was hanged, drawn and quartered at Knavesmire. As the guards fastened his chains, he smiled and said, "I fear me, I shall be over-proud of my new boots." Centuries later, Pope John Paul II beatified him as Blessed Francis Ingleby, making the family's martyrdom official in the eyes of the Church. The pattern of peril continued. The Inglebys became central figures in the gunpowder plot of 1605, the most notorious act of treason in English history. 9 of the 11 conspirators were connected to the family by blood or alliance. Thomas and Robert Wintour, Sir William's nephews, were among the key organisers. Their mother, Jane Ingleby, had raised them in the faith that made them both loyal and dangerous. Ripley Castle itself played a part. In the years before the plot, King James I had been entertained there as a guest. 2 years later, the same castle served as a safe house for his would-be assassins as they secured horses for their planned escape. To protect the priests who moved through their lands, the Inglebys commissioned a hidden chamber within the castle, what came to be known as a priest hole. It was constructed by Nicholas Owen, the Jesuit craftsman so skilled in concealment that he became known as Little John. His secret rooms saved countless priests from capture, and when he was finally arrested in 1606, he died under torture in the Tower of London without betraying a single one. Owen was canonized as a saint in 1970, joining the Inglebys' own martyr in heaven. But the chamber he built at Ripley Castle remained undiscovered until 1963, nearly 400 years later. That small, airless space, just large enough for a crouching man with a candle and a Bible, symbolizes everything the Inglebys risked to remain faithful. It was rebellion, built into stone and wood, invisible yet unyielding. And as faith turned to legend, rebellion itself became inheritance. The next generation would take that defiance from chapel to battlefield, with one woman destined to carry it farther than any man before her. 17th century England was a land divided by loyalty and faith, and few families embodied that tension more vividly than the Inglebys. As the Civil War erupted between royalist and parliamentarian forces, Ripley Castle once again found itself drawn into history's fiercest storms, this time under the command of its most unexpected defender. Jane Ingleby was no ordinary gentlewoman. When the royalists took the field at Marston Moor in July of 1644, she disguised herself in armour and rode into the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. The thunder rolled overhead as cavalry clashed through mud and smoke, and amid 40,000 men stood a single woman determined to fight for her king and her family. The royalist forces were shattered. 4,000 soldiers fell within 2 hours, and Jane rode home through the wreckage, exhausted, wounded, and pursued. Ripley Castle loomed ahead like a sanctuary of stone. Her brother William, wounded and hunted, fled inside to hide within the priest hole, the same secret refuge that had saved their family's priests a century before. Minutes later, the hoofbeats of Oliver Cromwell's cavalry echoed through the courtyard. The conqueror of northern England demanded entry. Jane met him at the door. The rain still fell, glinting off the iron of her pistols as she faced the man who had crushed the royalist cause only hours earlier. She allowed Cromwell and his men shelter in the outbuildings, but refused him a bed within the castle. Through the long, cold night, she sat opposite him, pistols in hand, while her brother remained hidden behind the panelling above. At dawn, Cromwell departed, but not without reminding Ripley Castle of his power. He ordered captured royalist prisoners shot against the gatehouse wall, the bullet marks still visible to this day. Yet Jane had done the impossible. She had protected her brother, preserved her family home, and defied the future ruler of England from within its ancient halls. From that night onward, she was known as Trooper Jane. Her courage transformed Ripley Castle from a symbol of survival into a monument of defiance. Every stone and beam of the old house seemed to carry her spirit, a reminder that courage, not comfort, had preserved its legacy. As the centuries turned, the Inglebys would weather new kinds of storms, wars, taxes, and now the modern market itself. But the legend of Trooper Jane endures, echoing through the corridors of Ripley Castle like the last gunshot on Marston Moor. Today, the gatehouse still bears Cromwell's bullet marks, the priest hole remains sealed behind Tudor oak, and the wagon roof curves above the same chamber where faith once hid from the crown. Yet for the first time in 7 centuries, the keys of Ripley Castle are being passed to strangers. The Ingleby line survived wars, plagues, religious persecution, and even the night when Trooper Jane faced down England's conqueror with 2 pistols. What they could not outlast was the arithmetic of the modern world, inheritance tax, maintenance costs, and the quiet exhaustion of legacy itself. And now, we'd like to see you in the comments. If money were no object, would you like to buy and live in a location like this? Or is it not your style? We look forward to hearing your taste below, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Mansions. Cheers.